So to look specifically at ovarian cancer then, which is the focus of our talk today, we know that about 10% of all ovarian cancers may be related to an inherited risk factor, an abnormal copy of a specific gene. That means that 90% of ovarian cancer is not hereditary. Of that 10% that is hereditary, most of those cancers are linked to the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, which many of you will have heard of, and I'll talk much more about them. So on this slide it shows even within BRCA1 and 2, BRCA1 accounts for the biggest section of the pie, BRCA2 for a smaller section. Then there is a small number of ovarian cancers that are part of a pattern of cancer called Lynch syndrome, which includes colon cancer as its most common feature. We also see cancer of the uterus with Lynch syndrome, and I'll talk briefly about it. And then there are a very small number of ovarian cancers that would be related to other genes, very rare inherited patterns of cancer, and I'm not going to talk about those. So to just talk a little bit about Lynch syndrome, which has also been called hereditary non-polyposis colorectal cancer, which is a mouthful, and so we have gone to calling it Lynch syndrome after the person who first identified it. We are suspicious of Lynch syndrome in a family when we see a family history that includes many relatives who've had colon cancer, colorectal cancer, at least one or more of them who had that cancer diagnosed before the age of 50, where we see a pattern of cancer over generations, meaning we're looking just at one side of the family and see a pattern. And we may also see people in that family who've had endometrial cancer, cancer of the uterus, ovarian cancer, some other cancers in the digestive system, especially if they're seen at younger ages. There may also be people in these families who've had more than one separate cancer diagnosis, either more than one colon cancer or a woman who's had endometrial cancer and colon cancer both. These cancers tend to happen at younger ages than those cancers are commonly seen. And with the colon cancers, they tend to move more quickly from being a small precancerous polyp to an actual cancer than the usual forms of colon cancer. Then moving on to talk about hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome, which may be what you're more familiar with. It's related to the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. And the slide lists some of the features that make us suspicious of hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome in a family. The first, for obvious reasons on this list today, is ovarian cancer, with fallopian tube cancers and primary peritoneal cancers being considered the same diagnosis. Excuse me. And it's important to know that while we say ovarian cancer, we're looking specifically at the invasive epithelial type ovarian cancers. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in a few minutes about why it's really important that we are able to review medical records to confirm the type of ovarian cancer that a woman has had in determining whether genetic testing for BRCA1 and 2 may be appropriate. That genetic testing is also, in addition to ovarian cancer, other features that we might see in the family history include women with breast cancer, especially when that breast cancer is diagnosed at younger ages than is typical. We may see several close relatives who've had breast cancer and or cancer of the ovaries. When we see a man with breast cancer who has female relatives who've had breast cancer or cancer of the ovaries, that can fit with this syndrome. And when we see breast or ovarian cancer in a family with Ashkenazi Jewish background, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. So how do we know if our own family might be at risk for hereditary cancer? As I've already suggested, there are some clues. Those might include the type of ovarian cancer that a woman has had, and review of the pathology report is really important. The family history also give clues, looking at the history of cancer in close relatives and a person's ethnic background. So to talk just a little bit about the different types of ovarian cancer. And the reason this is important, as I've suggested, is that it's only the epithelial ovarian cancers, and even within that, the specific type of ovarian cancer, which is identified as high-grade serous ovarian cancer, which is likely has a significant chance to be connected to the BRCA1 and 2 genes. There are other types of epithelial cancers, endometrioid ovarian cancer, clear cell ovarian cancers. Those cancers are more often seen in women who've also had endometriosis and less likely to be connected to BRCA1 and 2. And then there are germ cell ovarian tumors, sex cord stromal cell ovarian cancers, both of which are rare. They're usually seen in younger women. Occasionally they're part of rare hereditary cancer syndromes, but I'm not going to talk about them at all today. So just a really big plug that before any genetic testing is done, it's usually important to be able to review a pathology report to clarify the specific type of ovarian cancer that a woman has had. To just review red flags that we might see in a family history that would suggest either hereditary breast ovarian cancer or Lynch syndrome, we're looking for features. Seeing the same type of cancer in close relatives on one side of the family, possibly a pattern of cancer over generations, seeing common cancers like breast cancer or colon cancer at younger ages than those cancers are commonly seen, seeing people with more than one separate cancer diagnosis, specific combinations of cancers in a family or in a person. So breast and ovary cancer together in a family, or colon and uterus cancer together in a family. And I'll talk a little bit more about the connection between Ashkenazi Jewish heritage and the BRCA1 and 2 genes in a minute. And I seem to have a bit of a tickle in my throat, so I'm trying to sip on some water and hope I won't start to cough. But if you think your family history suggests hereditary cancer, any of those clues, the specific type of ovarian cancer that you or somebody in your family has had, your ethnic background, your family history, the first step is to talk to your own doctor. In talking with your doctor, it's probably helpful to have collected details about your family history. If it's possible to have 3 generations of family history, to know the ethnic background of both sides of your family, particularly the side of your family where you might be concerned. It's important to look at each side of your family history, your mother's family and your father's family. And we're going to look at them separately. But just a reminder, there has been a misunderstanding for many years that a history of female-type cancers, so ovarian cancer, cancer of the uterus, breast cancer, in your father's family doesn't count. But going back to what we know about genes, if there's a gene being passed down in a family that increases the risk for those types of cancer, a man can be born with a mutation in one copy of that gene and pass it on to his daughters without necessarily developing related cancers himself. So it is important to look at a significant history of cancer in a father's family, just as it would be important if that's in the mother's family.